The dining room went quiet when my mother said it. Not whispered. Not softened. Clear enough for everyone at the table to hear. My daughter froze, fork halfway to her mouth. My sister stared at her plate. No one corrected my mother. No one asked what she meant. She explained calmly that a sweet 16 was a reward, not a right. That some behavior didn't deserve celebration. My daughter didn't cry. She didn't argue. She just looked at me. And in that moment, I understood exactly where we stood in this family. My mother had always been the one who decided what was appropriate. Not just for herself, but for everyone around her. She called it standards. She said families needed them to function. Growing up, I learned quickly that disagreement was treated as disrespect. If she framed something as, for the good of the family, the conversation ended there. You either adjusted or you were quietly labeled difficult. The Sweet 16 conversation didn't start as an argument. It was supposed to be logistics. Guest count. Budget. Where to host it. My daughter sat with us at the table because I wanted her included. I thought transparency mattered. I didn't realize my mother had already decided the outcome. She waited until everyone was seated, until food was served, until it would be uncomfortable to challenge her. Then she said my daughter didn't deserve it. She said it with the same tone she used to comment on expired groceries. Practical. Final. When I asked what she meant, she didn't raise her voice. She never does. She said my daughter had caused problems with her cousin earlier that year. That she had embarrassed the family by refusing to apologize properly. That rewarding her would send the wrong message. My sister didn't look up. Her husband cleared his throat and checked his phone. No one asked what actually happened between the girls. No one asked my daughter for her side. The judgment had already been processed and approved. What had really happened was smaller and messier than the story my mother told. My niece had taken my daughter's phone without asking and gone through her messages. When my daughter confronted her, voices were raised. My niece cried. Adults intervened late. Somehow, the narrative became that my daughter was aggressive and ungrateful. My mother accepted that version immediately. It aligned better with family comfort. My niece lived closer. Her parents needed help more often. Convenience has a way of shaping truth when no one pushes back. I looked at my daughter across the table. She kept eating. Her face stayed neutral, but her shoulders were stiff. I recognized that posture. It was the same one I used as a teenager when I knew speaking would make things worse. I didn't defend her in that moment. I hate admitting that. I asked for time to think. My mother nodded, satisfied, like the matter was settled. Later, she texted me links to articles about discipline and accountability. As if this were about parenting philosophy, not public humiliation. That night, my daughter asked if she had done something unforgivable. She didn't ask about the party. She asked about her place in the family. I told her no. I told her sometimes adults choose the version of events that makes life easier for them. I didn't mention her grandmother by name. I was still hoping this could be smoothed over quietly. That if I waited, my mother might reconsider. Waiting had always been my default response. It had never worked, but it felt safer than pushing back. Over the next few weeks, plans moved forward without us. I heard about venues through my sister. I saw decorations in my mother's garage when I stopped by to drop something off. No one asked if we were attending. It was assumed we would adapt. I felt a familiar withdrawal settling in. Not anger. Not grief. Just distance. I realized this wasn't about a birthday. It was about who was protected and who was expected to absorb discomfort to keep things running smoothly. And once again, it wasn't us. As the weeks passed, the story hardened into something official. My mother repeated it the same way each time, with small adjustments that made it sound more reasonable. She said my daughter had a pattern. She said this wasn't punishment, it was guidance. When relatives asked, she framed it as concern, not control. People nodded. They always do when a confident explanation saves them from having to look closer. I started noticing how often my daughter was left out in subtle ways. Family group chats went quiet when she spoke. Invitations arrived late, or not at all. My niece's activities were discussed openly. My daughters were acknowledged only if they couldn't be ignored. No one was cruel. That was the problem. It was all polite. All reasonable. Exclusion delivered in a calm voice is harder to challenge because it pretends to be fair. My daughter stopped mentioning her birthday. She focused on school, stayed in her room more, and asked fewer questions. One evening, I found her sorting through old photos on her phone. Pictures from when she was younger. Birthdays with homemade cakes. Candles crooked, frosting uneven. She didn't cry. She just said she guessed those things were for kids who behaved better. I corrected her, but the damage had already settled. Silence teaches faster than lectures ever could. I thought back to my own childhood. How often my mother had decided I was too sensitive. How quickly my discomfort was reframed as attitude. I had learned to disappear without leaving the room. I realized I had passed that skill on without meaning to. My daughter was doing what I had done. Making herself smaller so no one could accuse her of being difficult. That recognition didn't arrive with panic. It arrived with shame, quiet and steady. The turning point wasn't dramatic. It came through an email. My mother sent a message outlining expectations if my daughter wanted to rebuild trust. Apologies. Better tone. Gratitude. It read like a contract. No acknowledgement of shared responsibility. No room for disagreement. Just steps to regain conditional approval. I read it twice, then closed my laptop. Something in me stopped negotiating. I didn't reply right away. For once, I let the delay stretch. Days passed. Then a week. My mother followed up, polite but firm. She asked if I'd seen the email. I said yes. She asked when we could talk. I said I wasn't sure. That answer unsettled her more than any argument ever had. I could tell by how often she repeated the question. I sat with the truth I'd been avoiding. This wasn't about my daughter's behavior. It was about control. About preserving a hierarchy where some people were corrected and others were protected. My silence had made that system easier to maintain. I saw now that by staying quiet, I wasn't keeping the peace. I was teaching my daughter that belonging was something she had to earn back after being accused. That realization didn't make me angry. It made me clear. The boundary was crossed without an argument. It usually is. My mother called one afternoon and told me she had spoken to the venue. She said she'd informed them my daughter would not be attending the party for now, until things improved. She said it like an update. Like something already handled. She didn't ask if I agreed. She assumed compliance. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, staring at the counter where my daughter had left her backpack. Crumbs from toast. A folded note from school. Ordinary proof of a child who had done nothing wrong. I told my mother she didn't have the authority to make decisions about my daughter's life without me. My voice stayed even. That seemed to irritate her more than shouting ever would. She said I was overreacting. She said she was trying to help. She reminded me of everything she had done for us over the years. The familiar list. Sacrifice framed as leverage. I listened until she finished. Then I said the sentence I had never said before. I told her she was no longer allowed to discipline my child. Not privately. Not publicly. Not through consequences disguised as lessons. There was a pause. Not silence. Calculation. She said I was choosing conflict. I said I was choosing clarity. The words surprised me with how accurate they felt. I didn't explain further. I didn't argue facts. I ended the call. After that, I stopped sharing details. No schedules. No plans. No emotional updates. When my mother asked questions, I answered briefly or not at all. When relatives reached out, I kept conversations shallow. I watched how quickly people became uncomfortable without access. I noticed how often approval had been mistaken for love. My daughter didn't ask what changed. She felt it. Invitations stopped arriving with conditions attached. Criticism no longer reached her through indirect comments. The house felt steadier. Quieter. Not happier yet, but safer. I realized then that boundaries don't need agreement to function. They only need enforcement. And for the first time, I wasn't asking my family for permission to protect my child. I didn't announce the distance. I let it take shape on its own. Fewer visits. Shorter calls. Holidays planned quietly, without asking who would be offended. My mother noticed, of course. She always notices shifts in control. She asked why things felt different. She said the family felt divided. I told her routines change as kids get older. That was true. I didn't offer more. The sweet 16th passed without a party. Instead, my daughter and I spent the day together. We took a long drive, ate somewhere she liked, and walked until the sun went down. No speeches. No photos meant for other people. Just time that belonged to her. She didn't pretend she wasn't disappointed. She also didn't feel ashamed. That mattered more than candles or decorations. Over time, the story my mother had built began to thin without our participation. Relatives asked questions she couldn't answer cleanly. Invitations became awkward. She complained that people misunderstood her intentions. I listened and stayed quiet. Explanations had always been my job before. I let the silence stand in this time. My daughter grew steadier. She stopped bracing for judgment. She laughed more easily. When her cousin tried to revisit the old conflict, my daughter disengaged without drama. I watched her learn something I hadn't at her age. That she didn't need approval from people who required her to shrink. I don't know if my mother understands what changed. I'm not sure she ever will. I've stopped needing her to. My role now is clear. I protect my child's dignity, even when it costs me access. Especially then. We moved forward without an audience, without reconciliation scenes, without permission. And for the first time, that felt like enough.